Hello and welcome to Dish Shelved with Adam White. Today we're going to be talking about The Art of Pulp Fiction, an illustrated history of vintage paperbacks by Ed Hulse. Ed Hulse is a uh, uh, pulp fiction historian and paperback historian. He knows a lot about the history of pulps and art. I actually got to meet him at a convention once. Very nice guy. Um, he also did The Art of the Pulps, which is a book like this. It deals with, well, this one deals with the paperback books from like the 30s through the 60s. Uh, the earlier one was on the pulp covers, and I've got it. It's a really good volume too. I really enjoyed it. He also has a Blood and Thunder Guide to Pulp Fiction, which I have and have read and is very good. Gives you a very good detailed history of the pulps and all the different types of pulps and when they happened and what was popular when. And I'd always recommend that. He also has uh, uh, I wouldn't call it a magazine. It's more like it's a printed paperback, but it's called Blood and Thunder. This is the 2021 annual. It came out late last year, uh, and he did it a while back. So I don't know how readily issues are available, but there are two issues available. One and excuse me, issues 1 and 2 of the current run of Blood and Thunder is available on Ed Hulse's website, as well as this one. And they deal with pulp fiction and paperbacks. They also talk about old movie serials and older movies, and it's just kind of a catch-all for any type of pulp stuff, which is all very entertaining. Now, this book, The Art of Pulp Fiction, let me tell you what it says about it. The mid 20th century saw paperback novels eclipse cheap pulp magazines and expensive cloth bound books as the most popular format for escapist fiction. To catch the eye of potential buyers, they were adorned with covers that were invariably vibrant, frequently garish, and occasionally lurid. In this book, award winning editor Ed Hulse offers a vivid history of vintage pulp fiction in all its forms, from hard boiled mysteries to Western adventures, from action heroes to the supernatural, from science fiction to the sleaze. Written and illustrated by a cast of characters often as colorful and fascinating as the books themselves. Though they were inexpensively produced and considered disposable by contemporary readers, the earliest examples of these books are now treasured as collector's items. The Art of Pulp Fiction is illustrated with more than 400 memorable covers and original cover paintings, chosen with both rarity and graphic appeal in mind, many of them reproduced here for the first time since the book's original publication. Uh, Lots of really great covers in this edition. It's hard to keep both of me in the book here because it's so big. Um, Published by IDW, so it's still readily available. This just came out last fall. Um, it's a really excellent book. Uh, has really nice end papers. Everything in it is pulpy. Um, it talks about, it gives you a little bit of history of dime novels and pocket books, which were the this is like the mass market paperback size. They were originally created for army people because they were a size they could put into their pockets and carry around. They talk one GI in here wrote that if he had a choice between a couple of paperback books or extra rations of food, he'd pick the books. He wrote to a pulp magazine one time. Uh, but they were really popular because they were in foxholes or in camps and had to pass the time somehow. And they manufactured these books at mass market paperback, what is today mass market paperback size, because they were easy to slip into pockets and they could carry around and read them easy. They could be traded, they could be sold at overseas and distributed to soldiers. So I thought that was really interesting that that was how they originally worked out, because back in that time, the pulps were still kind of king of the hill in terms of disposable entertainment, what it was considered. Uh, it talks about how when those GIs came back from the war, World War II especially, that they actually preferred the paperbacks to the pulps because they were so used to them being able to carry them. They were easier to carry on the subway or the train, to read on their way to work, on commutes. It talks about the crime and mystery novels. That accounted probably for at least 50% of the output of paperback books to begin with, was the hard-boiled mysteries and uh, people that came to fame like Mickey Spillane. He made all his money on paperback books, and he made a lot of money off of paperback books. And he wrote good ones. He started with I, the Jury, which is a title I like. It was his first Mike Hammer book. Uh, but there's a lot of stuff. Those were all in paperback. A lot of times they'd still publish stuff that was originally serialized in magazines or the pulps. Uh, but they also found that there was a really good market for original fiction too. Uh, the next big craze was westerns, and what made them popular was the same thing that made them popular, and why every TV show was a western at the time. And it was still a time within memory of people that were alive, and they liked to see it fictionalized. Then there was adventurers such as spies, pirates, warriors, explorers, and soldiers of fortune. They Any kind of pirates, or the pirates was like a subgenre of the uh, of paperbacks that was popular for a while. Uh, but mostly just adventurers. Next was, and what is my favorite, is the vintage pulp science fiction. Uh, they had the best covers of any. I mean, there was a lot of good covers for all the genres, but the science fiction pulps, that's what there's probably the biggest market for today in paperback fiction. The ace doubles that had a cover on both sides that you flip the book and you'd have two books to read in one in paperback, and those were popularized by Ace, the Ace doubles. Lots of great science fiction first appeared as paperback books. Then there's also tales of horror, supernatural, and imagination. Uh, those were the fantasy. There wasn't a lot of fantasy at the time. It does talk about The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, but at the time, that's about all there was. Fantasy hadn't really come into its own as a genre yet when these pulps, or not pulps, but the paperbacks were holding on. There was a pulp hero revival where they brought back characters like Doc Savage and the Shadow, both of which were extremely popular, especially Doc Savage. They made tons of money on Doc Savage reprints, and I believe they reprinted every Doc Savage story that appeared in Pulp magazine, and they made a lot of money on them. And I love the Pulp heroes too. Uh, they also tried to do some others like the Spider, but they just didn't get popular enough to continue. But the Shadow had quite a few, and he also they had covers by why is his name blanking me? I can't think of his name right now, but they had great covers. And then there was the covers that's the popularized version with the Widow's Peak hairdo of Doc Savage. They sold every issue of Doc Savage as a paperback book. There was also kind of sleazy novels. They got into the sleazy aspect, kind of the sexy type novels, which, although some of them were very controversial at the time, they probably wouldn't even rate batting your eye at them now. Some of them might, but for the majority of it, it was probably pretty tame considering today's standards of what you can put in books and on movies and stuff. But it had a little bit of a sleazy side. I'll show you some of the things, pictures. Here's some Sherlock Holmes and Raymond Chandler, Agatha Christie, Dorothy Sayers. These are some of the the mystery and detective fiction. Then there were um, the westerns, King Colt by Luke Short. It says they took away his badge, so he made the law with his gun. You gotta love that. Bought with a Gun by Luke Short. Buchanan Says No. Lots of really good photos like that. Here's some along with an original painting they show of, I'm trying to get the glare off of it, that were prominent in adventure fiction. A lot of them took place on ships out at sea. She Shark. That looks like an entertaining one. I might have to look that one up. Men Against the Sea. There was a whole subgenre of that. This one is from a book called Atta, A-T-T-A. I've actually read that book. It's about a man who shrinks in size and ends up befriending an ant and has adventures and has to fight off other insects and stuff. That was before The Shrinking Man by I'm so bad with names today. Richard Matheson wrote. This was actually before that. This one, these I found kind of funny. These are the ones you'd see for some of the sleazier novels. The one down here that says, only her body for sale. It hurt him to find her a whore. It hurt even more when he was quoted the price. So you can see with like House of Fury, female convict, Summer of Sin, there was like a women's prison motif to some of them. Also, there was some of the first lesbian fiction, which was actually really popular. And you could probably find more of it today, but you'll find all sorts of stuff like that in this book. The Art of Pulp Fiction, The Illustrated History of Vintage Paperbacks by Ed Hulse. Great cover. It's a compilation of several covers that you see more in more detail inside the book. There's a lot of great photographs of stuff you can't get anymore. Some of them have never been reprinted from when they were had first editions. Books like Satan Was My Pimp, which, I mean, who can say why that went out of print? I mean, you just have to wonder. But that also fell into the sleaze category. There was some pretty funny stuff in it. Very conversational book. And in addition to all the pictures, there's each chapter has a nice section of text that tells you about the different genres and when they're popular and who the most popular artists were. Uh, Really, really great book. I highly recommend it. I highly recommend anything by Ed Hulse. Any of his work on Pulp Fiction is fantastic. Uh, I really hope you'll pick up something of his if you have any interest at all in the history of the pulps or paperbacks. This is a great book. Makes a great gift uh, to someone who might you think might have an interest in that. I really, really enjoy all his books, and like I said, I've read most of them, and they're all excellent. And this is just the newest in a line of his really excellent books. So I hope you'll pick it up. And thanks for hanging out with me this week, and I'll catch you next week.